How are you? So really excited because tonight, anytime we get to bring our collective cohorts together, it's a really exciting time for us. So thank you all for being here. I just want to make a couple of announcements and just note a couple of upcoming events as well before we introduce our speaker for this evening. So for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to meet yet from Careers in Code, and Taylor Hodge, the Assistant Director for Erie 21 and Lot 4 Program Manager. And if you are attending the Rock on Tech Conference in Rochester this week, I know we have folks from Careers in Code and from the certificates going. I do have folders and pens for you to take with you later this week. That way you can just kind of collect any business cards, other flyers you might get, information along the way. Couple of things that we have upcoming. Cody Magi will be here from SUNY EOC on Wednesday for just a brief overview of resources and trainings available through their Attain Lab. And then also the summer networking event. Why I want to note this is because we're in the building where it'll be held. So the lobby you came through in that patio, that's where the summer networking event will be held on Wednesday, July 26th. So looking forward to having you there. And I know Sarah completed the invite earlier, so we're excited to have you there as well. So without further ado, we are thrilled to welcome Diversity, Talent Acquisition and Retention Officer Sarah McMinney from the New York State Office of Information Technology to share about their critical work statewide in information security. She will be sharing about the type of career opportunities available, how to apply, and what New York State Office of Information Technology looks for in an employee. Sarah, thank you so much for connecting with Erie 21 and for being here with us this evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with you guys. So like you heard, my name is Sarah. I'm the Diversity, Talent Acquisition and Retention Officer at the New York State Office of Information Technology Services. So what does that mean? So my role is basically this. I go out. Can you speak up this person? Oh yeah, sure. So is that loud enough? Okay. So this is my whole job. I go out into the public and I talk to people about the work that we do at ITS, how you can get a job with us, what the career path looks like, things like that. Governor Hochul this past year gave us as an agency a goal of creating between 600 and 800 brand new positions at our agency. That's a lot of positions, and it is actually more challenging than you would think to fill those roles. So that's where I came in, and I'm here to talk to you guys about what we do, hopefully get you guys interested in maybe working for us in the future. So a brief overview, this is basically what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. Who we are, what do we do? I'm going to go into information security because that is really becoming more and more important, tied to the work that we do. And then what it's like working for ITS and working for the state in general. So who are we? So we are essentially New York State's IT department. We were created in 2012. Before that, each state agency had their own IT department. 2012, they decided it made more sense for there to be one overarching IT department that helps out all the state agencies. So we were created. We provide mission critical support for over 50 state agencies. So it can range from tax and finance, health department, labor, cannabis management, any state agency you can think of, we're doing their IT work for them. So what does that mean? So you can see the kind of things that we're handling, over 16 million public accounts. So if you have a driver's license, if you're registered to vote, you have a public account that we handle. There's about 200,000 state employees. So we are responsible for overseeing and handling all of their accounts. You can see we handle a number of phones, a number of workstations, desktop hardware, servers, remote desktop connections. The last bullet is actually my favorite. So altogether, we handle 33 petabytes of storage. So to give you an idea conceptually, because that's just kind of like a random number, 1 petabyte would cover about 90 football fields in data. So 33 petabytes, that's a lot of information that we're handling on a daily basis, which ties into, like I mentioned, why information security is so vital for us. So what do we actually do? So like I mentioned, we are the state's IT department. So we do that in a bunch of different ways. We support the public, we support the state workforce, and then you're gonna be sick of hearing information security by the end of this. So I'm just gonna keep talking about it. So how do we support the public? So like it says there, we build, enhance, and troubleshoot applications and websites for state agencies. Now, some of these applications and websites you see on a daily basis. If you have a driver's license, if you renewed your registration online for your car, if you filed for an unemployment claim, anything like that, we built that website, we built that application. Now, some of the work we do supports you, but you don't actually see it. So agriculture and markets, as an example, what they do as an agency is they make sure that the food supply in New York State is safe and it's not going to harm you in any way. So they go and inspect restaurants, shopping, supermarkets, bodegas, anything like that. They collect all of this information. What do they do with it? We build applications and databases for them to store that information, run their reports, analyze it, and that is going to ensure that you're safe. Similarly, we do the same thing for the health department. They license your doctors, your medical professionals, things like that. So like I mentioned, there's about 200,000 state employees. Part of our mission is to support that. So that can be workplace services. We set up desktops, laptops, phones. We do server maintenance for state workers, basic things like that. And then the most important point, again, information security. It has its whole section. So what is our role in information security? So we basically are promoting how important cybersecurity awareness is, information security. We provide training for the public and for state agencies. Now, some of it is basic training, right? Change your password, don't write your password down, don't make it easy to guess, don't, click on those random emails that you get that said you want $1 million from a random print. But some of it is more advanced. We work with agencies to try and thwart hackers. Cyber espionage sounds dramatic, is an actual concern for us. So to do that, these applications and these websites that we build, we're continuously scanning them, scanning the code that we wrote to identify if there's any vulnerabilities that may make your data, your information susceptible to bad actors. Unfortunately, sometimes things happen. It's kind of the nature of the game. So when that happens, we're triaging the cyber events, we're investigating, we're supporting the agencies if there is a data breach, how they relay that to the public, how they sort of remedy that. Two, I think, pretty cool things that we have. So we have a red team. If you're not familiar with the idea of a red team, there are employees, but they basically pretend to be hackers. So they perform, it's called penetration testing on our systems, and they pretend they're hackers, cyber espionagers, bad actors, whatever, and they actively try to hack into our systems. The idea being, if we can be proactive and identify these vulnerabilities, we can kind of prevent outside entities from being able to do it. And then the last thing, this is our newest endeavor, Joint Security Operations Center. So this is the first of its kind anywhere in the country. It's a joint endeavor that we are doing with Homeland Security, State Police, MTA, our authority. Basically, anyone who would need to respond if there was some sort of attack against New York State, for lack of a better word, whether it's a cyber attack, whether it's, some other kind of attack. It allows us all to work together. We're all in one room, collaborating, sharing information. It allows us to respond quicker, and it allows us to have a more cohesive response. So why do I keep talking about this? So, like I told you, we have access to so much information. Think about all the information that we have or that state agencies are holding on to. So DMV alone, I could if I was a hacker, could get access to your name, your date of birth, your address, your social security number. It's all I need to steal your identity, ruin your credit, ruin your life if I really wanted to. You know, there's more sensitive information that agencies have. So the health department has records, if you've ever been diagnosed with certain kinds of diseases, you know, STDs, foodborne illnesses, things like that. The health department actually has databases, encrypted, yes, but databases with the information of everyone in New York State who's been diagnosed with certain diseases. Not necessarily something that you would want to get out there. So that's one reason why we are so adamant about protecting this information. But also outside of the information, consider these applications that we're building for the state agency. What happens if they're hacked and are taken offline? So Children and Family Services, they take in reports of child abuse, mistreatment, abandonment, neglect. What happens if their phones are down and their websites are down? They can't take those reports. Same with the health department. You know, if you can't verify that your doctor is licensed, kind of a problem if you have a medical emergency. If you're unemployed and the labor department systems are down and you can't get your unemployment payment and that is your whole source of income, not really great for you. So there are actual real world consequences if the systems that we build and support are taken offline. That's why, you know, we're so into this idea. Real world example, like I said, this is not just Egypt being dramatic. You can see this in the news. China just recently put malware in telecommunication systems in Guam. I mean, there's really nothing to say that they couldn't do it here, especially when you consider that New York State does include New York City. So we have access to a lot of applications and information that is specific to New York City. You know, Wall Street, any of the financial systems in New York City, we have access to their data and their information. So we're very serious about protecting it and kind of limiting any repercussions from the people we don't want getting a hold of it actually getting hold of it. So that is a very brief overview of what we do. I mean, I could go into details and we would be here for much longer. That's just kind of a high level overview. So what is it like actually working for ITS? So first, what are we looking for in employees? Obviously, we want people that have IT related experience. What that experience looks like is varied. You know, it could be you helped your family, you know, set up their computers at home, all the way to, you know, you built your own applications on your own desktop or whatever. So there's a wide range of experience that we look for, kind of depends on the position. Do we require a degree? We do not require a degree to work for New York State ITS. We believe, like I said, experience comes in all shapes and forms. And especially for IT related work, you do not necessarily need a 2-year or 4-year degree to work for us. You can get the experience in other ways. So I just want to make sure that point is made. Because I think some people think, oh, government work, you need a degree. Not for us specifically, you do not. So I believe in the work that we do. Kind of sounds maybe like woo-woo, but I've been working for New York State for almost 6 years now. Does government work in the state, can it get a bad rap? Yes. But the work that we do is important. And like I mentioned, it does impact you on a day-to-day basis in some ways that you think, and in some ways that just flies under the radar. But if we weren't there, you would notice a distinct difference in the services that you're able to receive and kind of your day-to-day life. So we look for people that, you know, believe in that. State work, government work, it can be, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It can be tedious. There is a lot of, you know, you may have heard like the phrase red tape, whatever. you know, it's not Google, it's not Apple, it's not the most exciting place ever, but again, the work that we do is important and it does matter. So we're looking for people that, you know, believe in that. Government work changes day to day. So we are looking for people to be flexible and adaptable. So a great example of this is our workers, our coders that are developing the applications for the Office of Cannabis Management. So cannabis, right, just became legal in New York State like last year. So the applications that we're building for that agency depend on the laws and the policies that the governor puts in place regarding cannabis, right? Those change regularly. So our coders that are working on the applications for cannabis management, they may build the application, have it done, and then the governor, the assembly, the legislature, whoever, there's some sort of change to the cannabis law or policies or procedures for New York State. So the application that they built is no longer any good and they have to rebuild it. So that's why being flexible and adaptable is so important, because we're kind of at the whim of, you know, the lawmakers, because the work we do kind of depends on what they decide. Team players, a willingness to learn, those are kind of, you know, maybe more common sense. None of our workers work on a silo, meaning that it's never one person building an application, building a website, supporting an agency, because if you leave, we're stuck. We don't have anyone who knows how you built what you built, what the agency needs, whatever. So that's why we have teams that support each agency and support each application. And like I said, a willingness to learn. Things are constantly changing with us. Just right now, right, with this rise of AI, we have teams that are just dedicated to researching AI and what it means for us, what it means for our applications. Is it something we can even implement with everything I said about the security of our data and our information? You know, things are constantly changing. Kind of makes it more interesting sometimes, but. So this is kind of a high level overview of our positions that we have. There's obviously more, but this is kind of like the entry level sort of deal. So we have two basic entry level positions you can see up there. ITS 1 and ITS 2. The only the salary is different, but the only real difference between the two of them is the amount of experience that you need to have. The ITS 1, so that first bullet, the grade 14, that is like true entry level. I have barely any experience. I want to learn. The grade 18 is if you have, you know, a little bit more experience. That would kind of be your route in. We also have project positions. So, like I said, you know, we're constantly learning, we're being flexible and adaptable. We have entire teams whose job is just to modernize old systems that, you know, again, me not being dramatic, are literally 30 years old that need to be modernized. I mean, they're written in programming languages that basically don't even exist anymore and people don't learn them anymore. So we have teams totally dedicated to just modernizing those systems. So those are our project positions. Grade and salary kind of varies based on what the position is and kind of what project you're working on. We have specific information security positions. Again, those grade and starting salary also vary based on position. Both the project positions and the information security positions, you can get those positions with very little experience. You know, we have those positions that are also considered entry level as well. And then we do have student assistant and internships, paid internships. So let me show you. This is connected to the internet, right? Okay. So I just wanted to give you guys like kind of a quick look about how you would maybe see what vacancies we have and kind of get an idea about how to apply. So let me back up. Is anyone familiar with the civil service system? Kind of what that means? Okay. So private sector, right, is kind of straightforward. You go to the website, you fill out an application, that's what it is. So any government job, whether it's state, city, county, the feds, whatever, operates on what's called a civil service system, which is, the idea behind it is it's merit-based, right? So it doesn't matter who you know, doesn't matter where you went to school, doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter if you're, a Nepo baby or whatever. It's strictly merit-based, so it's just a little bit different than if you have experience with applying for jobs in the private sector. It's just a different place to look at it. So you can see, this is our LinkedIn page. We do post all of our jobs on the LinkedIn page, so you can always see and what we have posted there. And if you click on any of those, it'll tell you, how to apply, what the requirements are and all of that. My favorite website, if you have any interest in working for the state, maybe not even for us, but just the state in general, is the State Jobs NY. So it gives you a bunch of different options, but if you go to for the general public, you can see the vacancies at this will show you every single state agency, again, not just us. So you can kind of get an idea about what's out there. Again, if you click on any of these, it'll go through, the salary, the hours. So one note about the location, don't get tripped up if it says Albany. All of our positions at ITS can be filled Albany, New York City, or any location throughout New York State. So do not get freaked out if you see that it says Albany. It's really statewide. We're just kind of limited to one location on these websites. But you can see, the minimum qualifications for each position, kind of what the duties are, and then it'll walk you through how to apply as well. But again, that's a great website if you have any interest in the state at all. You can search by specific agencies, but like I said, there's, tons of agencies. So you kind of just wanted to see what was out there. So this last bullet is kind of what we get into with the civil service system and why it's a little bit different. So for our ITS 1 and ITS 2 positions that I mentioned, so not the project, not the information security position, those are first two bullets. The way you apply for them is you basically fill out an online questionnaire. It's a survey. Ignore how it says exam. I'm trying to convince them that it probably shouldn't call it an exam because it's not an exam. It's a questionnaire. You create a profile, you fill in, what your experience is, if you've taken any courses, if you have any certificates, and then it basically gives you a list of all kinds of pages and pages of different IT related things, whether it's desktop support, whether it's experience with Java, and you fill in, I have this number of months or years of experience, and that's basically how you get into our system. So like I said, a little bit different than private sector, but that's kind of how the state likes to do it. So the last part, benefits of New York State employment. This is for any agency in New York State, doesn't have to be us, could be anyone. One of the really nice perks about working for the state is our benefits. So we have tons of time off, flexible work options. You could work 4 days a week and just more hours each day. They're really, really flexible about scheduling. Some locations do have on-site childcare centers. We have a great pension plan. We do not have a 401k, we have a pension plan. which is really nice because you essentially never have to worry about it. It doesn't really matter how much you contribute to it. What you're paid out at retirement is calculated based on what your salary is. That's nothing to do with how much you contribute. So it's really nice, because it's, more guaranteed than whatever you can manage to contribute to a 401k. College savings plans, you can see the different accounts we have. The last bullet is honestly why I work for the state. You get your student loans forgiven after 10 years. Yes, I believe in the work that we do, but that does not hurt either. If you have a good amount of student loans, they're completely wiped out after 10 years, which is really nice if you have a lot of student loans. So we've got great health insurance for you and your family, your dependents. Dental and vision are free. You don't pay for dental or vision insurance. More things on leave. We've got tons of learning opportunities. We have an online database just for ITS employees. ITS gives each employee a goal of doing 37.5 hours of training each year. And that's not training on your own time. You can do it during your work hours. We'll pay for it. If you want to get a certificate, if you want to learn some new coding language, we'll pay for it. We'll set you up to be able to have that happen. If you want to pursue a degree or another certificate while you're a state employee, we will pay for that as well. Like I said, tons of training. And the vast majority of our positions are union represented, which also has a lot of great benefits. A lot of great protections for you. Number one being the state's not going to lay you off, which is really nice. It's one of the most stable jobs you can have. Something catastrophic would have to happen for the state to start firing people. We didn't even fire people during COVID. So if stability is something you value, the state is a really great place to get that. That's it. Any questions? Yes.
Are there any opportunities for remote work?
So our ITS as an agency, our telecommuting policy is 50% in the office, 50% remote. But again, that in the office location can be anywhere in New York State. It doesn't have to be Albany. Yeah.
So you said bachelor degree is not required, but on LinkedIn, is there like specific jobs that doesn't say like bachelor on it? Because when I look, it says like.
So they should give you. So some of the information security positions may say that they require a degree, but that's just because information security is a little bit more technical in nature.
I was looking at the level 1.
It should give you an option of. I'll show. This is a technical website, but like this is an internal website, but it should show up. Most positions are going to give like a couple of different options for minimum qualifications. Let's see if this. Yeah, so if you can see, they give you 3 different options for the ITS one. So associates or 60 credit hours or 1 year of experience. But I'm going to be honest with you. So I am currently working with civil service to get the associate's degree removed totally as one of the options and to reduce the years of experience. So if you see something that you're interested in and you're close to what it says as minimum qualifications, still apply, because that is one of the projects ITS is currently working on, is changing up these minimum qualifications to better reflect our belief that you can get experience in other ways than the classroom. So still, don't want to scare you off, still apply. Yeah,
Is New York State, like, to get a job with them, are they still requiring the COVID vaccine?
Nope. She asked if you still had to be vaccinated for COVID, which we did away with that, so no.
So how does New York State kind of measure success in this role? Let's say I get the first general position.
Mhm.
Is there a ticket system? Do you measure by the amount of tickets per hour or X, Y, and Z? I don't know.
So, that is kind of one of the, I would say, the benefits of union represented positions. So the union that represents our ITS positions, their current collective bargaining agreement, we cannot evaluate you based on a quota. So we can't say you have to do 75 tickets a day in order to pass probation. We're not allowed to do that. So we evaluate success in other ways, usually more soft skills, your interest in the work, your ability to work well with others, your openness to training. Again, that's kind of one of the benefits of being union represented, is that it forces us, not forces, it makes us be more creative in how we evaluate you, because a quota system really doesn't tell us anything. Like, just because you're doing 75 tickets a week doesn't mean you're doing them correctly, or you're pleasant to work with, or you take direction well, So each position, you have probation, both for you to check us out and for us to check you out. But like I said, it's very challenging to get fired from New York State. So we will always work with you to give you training, if that's something that you maybe need to be more successful at the role. Yeah.
You mentioned that the difference in the grade is basically experience based. If you started at one, once you meet the qualifications, two, is that an automatic promotion to that grade, or is there a process that you go through?
So it's not automatic, but we want ITS to be a career for you and not just a job. So it's not automatic, but your supervisor will walk you through the steps to bump you up to the next role. It's not automatic because of that civil service system, right? There's a process we have to go through, so it's more objective than subjective. But your supervisor will walk you through that role, because we want you to stay. We want it to be a career path for you. And it's an extensive career path. I mean, yes, the ITF one starts at 40 something, but the highest position you can go to starts at like 150,000. So there's a nice career path that you can get into. Yeah.
Two questions,
Sure.
one remote and one personal. The remote question is are these positions PEF union?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other question is, any advice for someone applying through this system? What's the biggest thing that you wish you knew, or you wish applicants knew?
A couple things. So it is a marathon, not a sprint. Some of that is the nature of the civil service system and state work. We run a little bit slower than the private sector runs. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. So if you apply, you're not going to hear back from us in a week. It may be a month until you hear back from us. So the important thing is really to be patient and not to get discouraged. The other thing is, if you're applying for a position, so the way it works, like just a hypothetical, you apply for a position, you submit your resume and your cover letter. The first people that see your resume and your cover letter are our HR department. And all they're doing is verifying that you meet the minimum qualifications. And if you do, they'll forward your information onto the actual IT technical hiring managers. Now, our HR department, great people, not IT people. So if you are actually applying for a position, the best advice I can give you is be as clear as possible in your resume and your cover letter, how you meet the minimum qualifications for the position. Because in all honesty, if HR can't tell, they're not gonna pass you on. So just be as clear as possible. You know, you may think you're, treating HR like they're stupid, but just really spell it out exactly for them, how you meet the minimum qualifications.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah,
For the internship process, is it like at certain times? Because I know you said sometimes it can take like a week to a month to get back to you, but like, is there a deadline for like internship?
no, so, the vast majority of our positions, including the internships, it's a continuous recruitment process. So there's no set deadlines. Now, some of these positions that you see online, you may see that they have a deadline. That's because the websites make us put in a deadline, but what'll happen is they'll come down and a few days later, we'll put the position back up. That's just, we can't really get around it on these websites, but everything is continuous recruitment. You can really apply at any time.
Is there any tuition reimbursement if you want to go back to school?
Tuition reimbursement? Yes, yep, there's PEP, the union that represents the positions. They're the ones that actually do tuition reimbursement, but yes, yeah.
Like completely free, 50%?
So it is, I would have to go to the contract. There is a limit on how much they will pay in a fiscal year, but depending on, how you space out your classes, you could get the whole degree covered.
That also to a master's program?
Yeah, the only, I guess caveat is what the class that you're doing has to be tied in some way to your job. But yeah, it could be a certificate, undergrad, master's, whatever.
So, so since we are in boot camp for 6 months, but before that, I have like self-learning, like teaching myself like how to code and stuff. Does that count towards 6 weeks? Okay.
Yes, yeah, this is what I mean. We're trying to be as open in what experience means. And the thing is, like, if you do that questionnaire online, your experience is self-reported. So we're not allowed to test you in the interview. Yeah, it's probably more beneficial for you to like not lie about the experience that you have, but it's strictly self-reported. So, you can consider experience in a number of different ways.
So ITS and like since we're doing web development, so we can do ITS with the same thing, or is like nice cybersecurity like different?
Say that again?
So ITS is like cybersecurity more, or like is everything we got like web development?
So it's all one agency. I would say right now, just because of the nature of the world that we're in, our positions are probably split 50-50 cyber and more general IT work. And again, that's our cyber positions have increased just because of, again, the nature of the world that we're in. Yeah.
For the interviews, do you guys do like any coding tests? Or
No testing allowed. No, they may ask you like some kind of hypothetical question, like, how would you do this? But we're not going to do any testing like that in the interview.
The process the same for internships, jobs, so it's questionnaire and application, or is internship process different?
So the internship process is different. Thank you for asking that. So the way the internship process, I'll just show you, works is So you do not apply for a specific position when you intern with us. You apply for our internship program. We'll review your resume and your experience, and we'll match you up with a team. So we assign you as opposed to you picking what position you want to apply for. So this is our website. You can get to this. This is a public facing site. So employment opportunities. So it's a different website. You basically upload your resume and cover letter right to there. And then, like I said, we match you up. We match you up with a team. Sure.
For interested students, do you recommend, would it be a good step for them to do the questionnaire if they're interested at all? To put their information in your system?
It never hurts. It never hurts. I mean, honestly, just because it does take a little bit, my advice is always try as many different entry points as possible. Just because it does take a little bit and you don't really know which way is going to pick you up first. The questionnaire is free. It does take a little bit of time to fill in all your information, but it absolutely never hurts. And you're in the system. I think once you do the questionnaire, you're in our system for 3 years, I believe. But you can go in and update your information if you gain more experience every 6 months. And that will kind of refresh you.
It's mentioned the remote hybrid. So if the students are local to Syracuse, is there a local that they work in your office building? Is that possible in Syracuse?
Yeah, we do have some people in Syracuse. I do not know the exact address off the top of my head, but we do have staff in Syracuse. But part of our push, right, because I said we have to fill 600 and 800 positions this year. We are kind of at max threshold in the Capital District, right? People know about us. If you're going to work for us, you kind of already work for us. So we've had to branch out, right, in who we advertise and who we go out and try and get to work for us. So that's kind of why we're expanding our feelers a little bit. With that, we are not going to be picky about where people work. That's why we say, you can really work anywhere. The nice thing about us is because we support all of these different state agencies, we can put a desk in any state agency. So like if there's a DEC location out here, we can put you at a desk. It doesn't necessarily have to be an ITS office. It could be a DEC office if you're supporting DEC or something like that. So it does give us a little bit more flexibility with where we put people. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. Do you guys offer like part-time positions or like both the internships? Is there like part-time or are they all full-time usually?
For the internships?
Yeah, internships or even like work positions.
So the internships can be part-time. I'm gonna say full-time positions. The majority of them are posted as full-time. You could always, that is always a discussion you can have with the hiring manager if you're more interested in maybe doing 50% work. The state has something, it's called voluntary reduction in work schedule, which basically means it's a full-time position, but you don't do 100%. So it is a thing that exists. It would just be something you would have to work out with the hiring manager.
How about the trainings? Does they do for entry-level positions? How long do they usually provide training for? Like just to start.
So training's continuous. So like I said, all of our employees, all the way from entry level to, me to our CFO, our top level, we're doing the 1 week of training each year, so it's continuous. Now, if you're brand new, when you're first hired, you'll work with your supervisor on something called a performance plan. And it will basically outline your goals for your first year working with us. Kind of the skills we want you to develop, the training that you want to take. So the bare minimum training that you would do in your first year is that 1 week. But again, it would be something you would develop with your supervisor. If there's more training that you want to do, as long as it's not some ridiculous astronomical cost and you want to go to like California to do it, we will work with you to put it into your performance plan and get it done for you. Yeah.
What was the name of the thing you said volunteer reduced?
Voluntary reduction in work schedule, VRWS is usually what it's referred to as. Yeah. Each department, like for us, for ITS. Yeah, so you could end up in really any of our offices, whether it's cyber, whether it's one of the programming teams, whether it's workplace services, setting up the desktop. You can, like I said, you apply, you basically go into this database of interns and the hiring managers go through and kind of match you up with what they're looking for. But you can definitely put, in your cover letter, I want to do an internship in cyber, and that will kind of funnel you to the cyber hiring managers.
If there are any other questions, I really just want to give a round of applause to Sarah. And thank you.
If anyone is interested, there's 2 information sheets up here. One's for the cyber positions, one's for the general positions. And then there's phone stands, and then this Walmart bag has actual charging cables in it. Help yourself if anyone wants one.
Sarah, we were able to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I unfortunately forgot my business cards. But yeah, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn.
It is general. Well, I got share. I can help you.
We are heading over to Freeman Hall.
That's right. It is kind of hard.
If you guys are remote, we are headed over to our other classroom. So take your break now, be back on around 6:45, 6:50. And hopefully we'll be over there by then. So see you guys soon.
You done shaved my, oh my God. When you do this? Can you hear me? You can't even hear me.
Right.
All right, guys, we are moved over, we are set up, and I am not hangry anymore, so we should be good to dive into class. For those who are remote, can you guys hear me okay? Cool, thank you. Let me move you over. Okay, so tonight we are, believe it or not, in our final week of JavaScript. Come back, monitor. I'm sorry I bumped you. Oh, it's this one that I bumped. Okay, sorry. So we are in our final week of JavaScript. So tonight we are diving into tic-tac-toe. That will be our final project that we're going to work on tonight and tomorrow. Then on Wednesday, we're going to do something pretty similar to what we did with the YouTube project. So you guys all, I'm not going to have anything prepped for class on Wednesday. You guys can come in and say, how would you do this in JavaScript? And I'm going to go build out a little interface for it, and we're going to go write the JavaScript to do it. And some of them may only be a couple minutes, and your questions could be like, hey, can you show me how to write a for loop? Or you could say something like, hey, I'm trying to build this interface. This is what I'm thinking. How would you go about doing that? So start thinking through. It doesn't have to be like, you guys don't all have to agree on the one project as a class. But start thinking about those questions, right? Start thinking about all of those JavaScript concepts that we've gone through, and then come in and be like, so still don't quite get functions, or you keep on saying events and I don't know what an event is, or you keep on using the stupid backticks and I don't know why we're using backticks instead of the single quotes, instead of the double quotes, or I'm still confused about data structures and when do we use an array, when do we use an object, right? All of those kinds of questions, get ready for Wednesday's class. So I'm hoping that all of you have a couple questions written down. That's your homework between now and Wednesday, is think about what questions I can do, think about what I can do on the spot to explain these concepts. And that's what we'll focus Wednesday's class on. Tomorrow, we are in the same classroom as we are tonight. If you can make it, great. If not, obviously, we are set up on Zoom. Jay Balunas will be joining us. He is at a company called Red Hat, which is one of the largest open source software companies. He's going to come in and give a whole discussion about Red Hat. He came in last cohort and gave a really good presentation on, you've been exposed to GitHub, but what does it mean to be an open source? What are the complexities of it? How do you start contributing to open source? And that can be a great way to get experience on your resume, right? So Gagan asked a good question during the state presentation. He said, well, what do you consider professional experience, right? When can I start saying, hey, I've got years of experience? And the response was, as soon as you say, hey, that's experience that I have, that's when we will start the timer. So open source projects can be a great way to say, hey, I am contributing something real. I am actually making this project that can be used publicly, right? That is already has a user base, and now I can go in and contribute to it, make some changes to the code, and have that be out there, whether that's fixing a bug, whether it's adding a new feature, really cool stuff that you can do with open source software. So Jay will be here tomorrow at 5:30. He will give his presentation, and then we will switch over to the second half of tic-tac-toe. Wednesday, we will also be in person, same classroom as here, and we will do that kind of throw problems at me, come up with some examples. I will do that on the fly. I may have to scope down some of your ideas, right? Obviously, I cannot build an entire application in 3 hours. It would be a good challenge, but maybe we'll not take that on. But think through your questions, be prepared for Wednesday's class. Think you can go back through the free code camp curriculum, scroll through there, and then be like, oh, you know what? I've read this word and I don't really know the vocab definition of it, or anything. You can go back to our existing projects and say, you know, you commented all of this out and there's this number 14 and I was following you up until 13 and then I lost you on number 14, right? So anything that you would like to bring to Wednesday's class, that is going to be the whole class. And I'll sit here for 3 hours if no one has questions. So make sure you guys are prepared for Wednesday's class. Thursday, we will be off for Rochester on Tech. I did post a message in the Rock on Tech Slack channel. If you are planning on going, make sure you respond to that poll, just so I know who I can expect to be there, and make sure that everyone has a ride and their ticket and all of that good stuff. So check the Rock on Tech channel if you are going. If you are not going, that is a great opportunity to either work on your capstone or take advantage of the Zoom room. So the Zoom room will open up just like it always does. So if you are not attending and want to have kind of a student study session, you are welcome to use the Zoom link at our regular 5:30 to 8:30 time frame. So feel free to take advantage of that. Before we dive into a new project, and I'm seeing that there are a ton of chats that I don't have open. Does anyone have questions in general?
I do, Max. I'm sorry. I don't know if you said this already, but the check-in for our capstone is next week.
It is not next week. So coming up, we've got tonight's class, tomorrow's class with Jay, Wednesday's class, which is going to be the open study question class. We are off on Thursday for Rock on Tech, and then we are off next Monday for Juneteenth. So no class next Monday. On Tuesday, you guys are not stuck with me. You have Ryan coming in. Ryan is going to teach you a little under 2 weeks because of that Juneteenth holiday. You're going to have Ryan for 2 weeks. He's going to teach you all about APIs, how to use them, how to use the data, how the internet works under the hood, getting into packets, things like the domain name system that Nathan introduced you to, all kinds of really cool stuff. So you are after this week, you have a 2-week break from me, but still regular classes scheduled except for next Monday. After Ryan's 2 weeks, everyone gets a week off for the 4th of July week. So we are off that entire week. And then that Monday that we come back, it's like July 10th-ish, I want to say, that is going to be your capstone check-in. So 2 very important things to keep in mind. 1, that capstone check-in is going to be the Monday that you guys come back. I am available for one-on-ones the entire time that I am not teaching. So obviously don't want you scheduling 5:30 to 8:30 during Ryan's class time, but I am available for one-on-ones. I am not like heading to Cancun or anything during my time off. So feel free to continue booking one-on-ones with me. And then I will check. It is basically the Monday after the 4th of July is the check-in date. Let me just confirm. It is the 10th, July 10th. So that is one thing to keep in mind, is that check-in will surprise you when you come back from break. And number 2, we do have a midterm project. So Ryan is going to walk you guys through how to build a top 10 bestsellers list with the New York Times. So that's really cool because that's using live data. All of your grades have been important up until now. However, that midterm project is the project where we go, are you going to cut it? Can you make it into the very end of this program? Because that New York Times is using JavaScript, is using HTML, is using your APIs. It is open-ended enough that you guys have to kind of think through, like, when do I need a function? When do I need an object? When do I need the DOM? How am I making the API call? How do I debug multiple steps? So you are welcome to schedule one-on-ones for help on that project, but that is completely nebulous right now, right? You guys don't know how to build that yet. You don't know how to make an API call. But at the end of Ryan's module, which is the last class is June 29th. You will have everything that you need to complete that project. if you are curious about that project, it is already live in Canvas. So you can read up a little bit more on that, but don't scare yourselves because you have not only this week, but 2 weeks with Ryan to learn how to build that entire project. So that is a very, very important project. That is where you can kind of gauge yourself and say, hey, I've been doing this. And when that time comes, it will be 12 weeks of instruction, right? 3 entire months you will have been in this program. That New York Times project is your chance to say, can I take everything that I've learned and apply it? And if you are panicking about that, if you are freaking out about that, don't. We are here for one-on-ones, right? You don't need to do this project on your own. Ryan is available for one-on-ones. I'm available for one-on-ones. Don't quote me on this, but Nathan is probably available for one-on-ones. And then, of course, your entire TA staff as well. It's important to mention that all of your TAs have been through this program. They have done this project. They have cried into their keyboards trying to get the New York Times data to show up on their freaking page, right? So definitely lean on your support network there. Don't panic, but also know that this is a really important assignment. What's up?
Where is that project?
That project, you're going to make a liar out of me and tell me that it's not posted. Let me share my screen. Off to the side. Assignments.
I know you want to get it in the first cohort, so it's not impossible.
Required projects. It is under assignments, required projects, week 12, New York Times API. And these are detailed instructions that Ryan has written up and a little note of encouragement from me up at the top. But again, don't work yourself up about this. Ryan is going to teach all of this and you'll have a much better understanding. Ryan is also probably much better prepared than I am as a teacher. So Ryan will have slides and different information, different teaching style. So definitely lean into that, ask questions. Ryan is someone who definitely excels when you ask questions. If you don't ask questions, he's going to just keep going. And then you're going to get to the end of class and be like, I checked out at 5:45 and I got lost, right? So don't let that happen. Ask Ryan a bunch of questions. He will use that as a pacing barometer. But as a teacher, when you get no feedback, you kind of think no news is good news, and no news is sometimes you lost the whole class at some point, right? So definitely use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Don't be afraid to message the TA. That is a great thing that you can do. If you're afraid to ask a question, you can message the TA and the TA can ask the question for you. So don't be afraid to give feedback. That goes for me, obviously, as well. But Ryan's a great teacher. He's been with the program since the very first cohort. This is his kind of 2-week module to shine. But don't be afraid to ask questions, test yourself a little bit, and see how you're going on that. Any other questions before we dive into tic-tac-toe? All right, guys, believe it or not, this is our last JavaScript project. That means that when I come back after the 4th of July, everything you've learned for project setup is going right out the window. We go into React, we learn a whole new way to set up projects, how to build out the web applications. And right when you guys finally feel comfortable with that, we hit you with the database and the backend and servers. And before you know it, the program is over. The second half of the program is what I enjoy so much more than the first half, because it's like now we get to hit the ground running, right? Now we're building projects that can actually be used on the internet by multiple people. And then right at the end, Nathan comes back in, shows you how to deploy all of that. That process has evolved every single cohort. Both Eva and Latonia can attest to that. And then Laura comes in, does a week with the career module, and before you know it, you're walking across the stage right where we were when we had the kickoff ceremony as well. So really awesome stuff coming up. Make sure to use your resources. I am not the best teacher in the world. Use different resources. If something is not sinking in, don't be afraid to come to me and be like, no offense, Max, not getting it, right? I can point you at 15 different things and maybe none of them make sense, but all it takes is that one and something will click. So we are limited in the number of hours we can have in class. Don't be afraid to tell me you're not getting it, and I can help you through that. And hopefully other people who have done one-on-ones with me will know that I'm not coming in to yell at you. I am there to help you get through the program. Our metric is you guys getting a job, right? And that is what's most important. So help us to help you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. With all of that said, let's kick off our final vanilla JavaScript project. So I am headed to my desktop. I am going to my code to a new folder called week 10. I'm going to make a new folder called day 1. I'm going to grab my day 1, drop it in VS Code. I will start a live share and drop that in the Zoom chat. I'm going to create my index. Nope, not print. I'm going to create my index.html. I'm going to create my script.js. I'm going to hold off on the style sheet for now. We might not need it.
Was it week 9?
Week 10. We are flying. I'm going to take my script, throw that down on the bottom of the page. I'm going to do a console log, tic-tac-toe. Going to get my HTML started, update my title tag, go into my body, grab my script tag with an src to my script.js. I am going to put an H1 called tic-tac-toe, and I'm going to go live. I'm going to pop open my console. Really important step. Do not forget to open your console, because your JavaScript could be trying to tell you something, but if you don't have that console open, it has no idea how to tell you what's going wrong. You should have tic-tac-toe in your console. If you don't, make sure you've got your script tag in here. Make sure you've got a console log. Make sure all of your files are saved. And we should be set up and good to go. If anyone needs help, I am here, Latonia is here, and I do have you guys up on my second monitor. If I am ignoring you remotely, just come off mute and scream bloody murder, and you'll scare everyone in here, but you will get attention. Oh. Oh. Everyone good? Anyone need help? I have the same thing. Basically, what that's doing is you see this like globe icon up at the top. That's called the favicon or the favicon. I've heard it both ways. And when you go on like any other website, you'll notice that it's like the little Google G or whatever. Because we don't have this file, it's just giving us a heads up on the developer side of things of like, hey, I'm trying to load that and nothing's coming in. So it's completely fine to ignore that. We see red and panic, but sometimes red is not a bad thing. Okay, so let's think back to all of the projects that we've created, right? We're starting to get a little bit better at saying, all right, what's this process look like? Whenever I start a project from scratch, what do I need to do? I do all the file setup. All right, great. We've got all of that done. What's the next kind of overall thing? What's the epic that we're trying to achieve here? And that's usually create an interface, right? What does it look like to the end user? Then it's make that interface interactive. That usually involves some kind of data that you need to keep track of. Then we need to tie our data back to our HTML. And once we've got our data tied to our HTML, we need to make sure that everything is still interactive the way we expect it to be. So when I think of tic-tac-toe, what's the first thing that comes to mind? The square and the board, right? So that's what we need to start with. Tara, no CSS file yet. We will work our way up to that. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to come back and do the lines. I don't need a really pretty user interface right now. What I really need is the buttons to show up so that when we do click on one of them, we know to put an X or an O in that spot. So I'm going to go to my HTML and I'm going to make a div and I'll throw an ID of board on it. And then I'm going to say, all right, what do I need? I need 3 buttons across. So I'm going to say button, button, button. And what do I get? I get this really ugly thing. And I'm like, well, that's weird. A button shouldn't be that tiny. If I just throw the letter A in it, the button gets much bigger. So I'm like, all right, well, I want those buttons to show up, but I don't want them to be squished. And when we start the game, there shouldn't be anything in them. So we can actually use a little hack here. We're going to say ampersand NBSP, and that's going to make a space show up in our button. What the hell is NBSP? It is a non-breaking space. Why is SP 2 letters and NB is whatever, doesn't matter. NBSP is a way in our HTML to get a space to show up without the browser getting confused and being like, what's the space doing in here? So I'm going to go ahead and take that and copy that 2 more times into my other buttons. And now I'm like, cool, I want to go down. So I'm going to make a 3rd button or 4th button. And I get 4 across. And I'm like, all right, let's not forget our basic HTML. How do we get things to push down the page? Well, we could do a row, but you notice I didn't pull in Bootstrap. Not every website needs Bootstrap, right? This is a little project. We don't need to go overboard. We don't need to pull in the entire grid system. So all I'm going to do is put a div in here. And because divs are block elements by default, in other words, they take up the full width of the page, that means I can take this div and copy it 2 more times. And just like that, I have a tic-tac-toe board. Three. You can make this project very much more difficult by making the board bigger. And so that is a very common thing of after people finish this project, they're like, what happens if I make a 4x4 tic-tac-toe board? Or you can go all the way up to like a 99 by 99 and play like a 4-hour game of tic-tac-toe. Not my cup of tea, but okay. So important to take a step back when we're working on these projects. You're following along, but think about the steps, because while you're following along with me and everything makes sense, it's also important to be like, all right, if some client came to me and said, can you make tic-tac-toe for me? First thing I would do is panic. And then after I'm over the panic, I would think, all right, user interface. We just did the user interface. All right, great, we're done. What did I say number 2 was? Well, let's think about how we play tic-tac-toe. How do you start a game of tic-tac-toe? You click on a button and the X should show up, right? So that's all we got to do is we got to make the X show up if we click on a button. Not an R version, although that's something you could add. So it is, we're going to go to our JavaScript And there are multiple ways of attaching an on-click, right? We could add an on-click to each one of these button tags, but I don't love that approach because we're repeating ourselves, right? We're saying on-click, 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 on-click. So let's do it another way. Let's say all buttons equals document dot get elements, and instead of using by ID or by class name, because we don't have an ID or a class, we can get them by the tag name. And the tag name is going to be button. So I'm going to console log out my all buttons because this is a function built into JavaScript. We know that because it's a document, right? It's using the document object model. It's going into our HTML, bridging the gap between our JavaScript. And what do I have over here? I've got my 9 buttons, but what am I really looking for in here? I'm looking for these square braces. What are those square braces telling me? It's an array. So I can't just say all buttons.onClick because that would just go to the list and be like, all right, when you click on this list of things, we don't actually want to add the onClick to the list. We want to add the onClick to each individual button inside that list. So what do we need? We need a loop. So we're going to say for const button of all buttons. Now, just to make sure this loop is working, I'm going to console log out my button and make sure I get all 9 buttons. Okay, well, now that I got access to each individual button, I don't need to log them all out. So I'm going to comment out this console log. I'm going to comment out that console log. Why is it important to do that? Because we're going to need 19 other console logs throughout this project, right? And if we forget to turn those off, it can be hard to find the ones that we actually care about. So I'm not completely deleting them because something could break along the way. And I want to go back in, comment them back in, and figure out where that break is going to be. So I'm going to say button dot onClick. And what do I want to happen when the button is clicked? Well, I want to go to the button that got clicked on. I want to go find the inner HTML of it. And I want to throw in an X. Anyone else hear that high-pitched whine? So annoying.
So, why the button is in the code?
Why?
Get type by 10.
Oh, because it's a string. So we're not saying go use some variable. We're saying no, go literally look for the letters button. So what we could do is we could say something like const tag to get equals button, and then put our tag to get in here. So we do it without quotes when we're saying this is a variable that we want you to go find. We do it with quotes when we're saying, no, this isn't a variable. This is, we literally want you to go find the word button.
But if we are using the by get element by ID,
Still quotes,
then
still quotes. So basically, you think about the computer as being very eager, right? It's just trying to follow instructions. And the computer needs to be explicitly told, no, we're not asking you to do something. We're just saying, hold on to this piece of information. Whenever we're saying, hold on to this piece of information, that's when we put it in quotes. So when we're saying like const, it's like, what's const do? All right, that's a new variable. I know how to do that. All right, whatever comes after the variable is always the name of the variable. All right, equals. Now I understand I need to store something in there, right? And it's like, what do you want me to store in there? And I'm like, just literally the letters button. Button does not mean go somewhere else. It does not mean figure out the variable. It does not mean do a loop. It does not mean go to the HTML. I'm just telling you, you don't have to figure anything out here. Just keep track of the letters button. Same thing when we come down here, right? We say document and JavaScript's like, great, HTML, I know how to do that. And then it's like get elements by tag name. That's built in. It knows how to do that. And then it's like, what tag do you want? And that's when we use that parameter. Because get element by tag name is just a function. It's a function we don't have to define because it's built into JavaScript. And we know it is because if we hover over it, VS Code is telling us retrieves a collection of objects based off of the specified element name. Well, what element name? That is when we use the parameter, and the parameter is the input, right? That's what's changing how the function runs. And it's like, what do you want to get? Now, if I put this in quotes, it's like, great, I'm going to go find an HTML element called tag to get. And we're like, well, no, we don't want you to do that. We want you to go get the value of tag to get. So now it's going to go get button and drop that in here. But oftentimes we want to just use a string without declaring it in its own variable. So this is an unnamed string. And by unnamed, we just mean, well, we just use the string. We didn't put it in its own variable.
But the safest way is to declare it first and then use it.
No, you can use strings inline. That's not a big deal. No, the computer will treat it exactly the same. That isn't considered bad code. It would actually be considered probably worse code to put everything in a variable, because then you're being very verbose, right? You're just having to name everything. One in this case, this code is much easier for me to understand than this code. Right? While you're learning it, that may make more sense. But for me, when I'm reading that, I'm like, tag to get. Now I need to go find wherever the variable tag to get is. I need to make sure it's declared to the right value. And then I can figure out what tag that's getting, as opposed to this, which is just saying, hey, go get the elements. What name should I use? Use the button.
It's just the string name or that tag. It's just called.
Just looking for the name button.
Yes.
Whatever button.
Yep. Yeah, so I could do document get element by get elements by name div. And then if I console log out, no, not assert, console log out all divs, I'm going to get by tag name. I'm going to get the 4 divs that I created already. Shoot.
Yeah, when you console log that, it says HTML collection, not array, and the other time it said no.
It is a technicality. Get elements by tag name doesn't technically return an array. It returns an HTML collection, which 99% of behaves like an array. And so it's a technicality of the document object model. If I do a type of this, I'm going to get object, which is even more confusing because you think, well, it has several items in it. It should be an array. For all intents and purposes, you can think of that as just an array whenever you see that, because HTML collections node lists all of them, just like arrays. You can use for of loops. You use indexes to access them, all of that kind of stuff. To be honest with you, I don't technically know the difference between an HTML collection and an array. I just know that whenever I see the square braces, most of the time I can treat it as an array, and in this case, you can.
But doesn't it, like, every time you do type of an array, it returns object, or does it never return array?
I believe you are right. If you do type of, yeah, you get that. So what you actually have to do if you're looking for an array, there's a function called array.isArray. And if you put like a number in there, it will say it's false. And if you put the actual array in, that is true. That is a major criticism of the JavaScript language, is that everything is an object. And oftentimes you'll hear JavaScript developers joke that everything is an object because other than strings, numbers, and Booleans, type of always returns object. So you have to use these stupid functions because type of won't tell you it's an array. You have to do an entirely different check called array.isArray to figure out if it's really an array or not. it sounds annoying. In practice, you don't really run into that as much as you think you would. And it's one of those things that like, it probably took me 8 years of writing JavaScript to memorize the array.isArray method. If you just Google JavaScript, how can I tell if something is an array programmatically? That will be the first thing that comes up. So don't feel like every command we're writing or using, you have to completely memorize. Know that as a developer, you will be using documentation every single day. I write code for several hours every day before I teach, and every single day I use documentation, or I'm sending documentation to a developer on my team so they can figure out how to read that documentation. Reading documentation is not a talent, it is a skill, right? Which means over time, you will not only get better at understanding what that documentation is telling you, you'll develop an even more important skill of filtering through the bullshit, because a lot of documentation is about 40 pages long and you need about 4 lines of it, right? And so that is another skill. And then knowing what to Google is a really big thing, right? And so whenever you ask for help, whether it's from me, whether it's a TA, another instructor, mentor on the job, no matter what it is, you want to provide context, right? Because the worst thing that I can get from you guys is my code isn't working. Would you like to share your code so I can help you with that? You know, like I'm going to need a little bit more than that, right? And so that can be very helpful too when you're asking for help, of saying, hey, this is what I tried. This is what I tried to Google. This is where I'm stuck. And that is a really important lesson, because when you're in Slack, nothing drives me more crazy than, hey, hi, how can I help you? Oh, here's all of this information. Well, why wouldn't you have sent that in the first place? You know, it's not how we would have a conversation. When we have a conversation, we want to go through all of that pretext and understand how you're feeling and all of that stuff. But if you are asking for help on any asynchronous platform, whether it's Slack, whether it's an email, whether it's even going up to the person, be prepared, right? And also understand that the biggest thing that we're learning from the Surge apprenticeship, which we're partnered with Center State through, is that the managers of the apprenticeship are like, for the love of God, just ask for help. You've been stuck on this problem for 4 days, and it turns out that it wasn't your fault, and I just needed to turn this on so it would work for you. Or so knowing when to ask for help is also a very, very important skill. And because it's a skill, it means you can build it, right? Skill versus talent. Talent means you're born with it. Skill means you can build on it. Okay. So I've got my on click here, and now I'm like, well, let's go try it. So I come over here and let me take this line out before I forget. It could be. I know it's an M dash for the longer hyphen, but I don't know if it's I'm not familiar with the MSP. Okay, so I'm in here. I click on a button and I get my X. No, we are not keeping line 2. Thank you, Sequota. Okay, so I'm in here and I click on. Oh,
sorry, Max, really quick.
Yeah.
When you get ready to show an example, do you think you can repeat the question that they asked in the room? Because like one of them I couldn't hear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the question that Sequota asked was in chat, but the question was, are we keeping line 2? But when there are
Yes,
questions in person,
I know that one.
okay.
It was
Cool.
like one of the other ones before, but I didn't want to interrupt you, so.
Max,
Just so you guys know, if you are curious, Gagan asked, why is this in quotes, right? And it's basically 1, because it's a parameter, and 2, we're saying literally look for the word button up in the tag. Okay.
are we keeping a const tag to get equals button? Had one on line 1, and I think you deleted it when you were doing all that other stuff, but.
This code is the only code we're keeping. Okay. Oh, what did I do? I did a console log button. We can keep that in there as commented out, just so if you were reviewing this code, you can go back to it. Any lines that you see in green are just for your review benefit. They do not impact the code whatsoever. So anything you see in green is optional if you want to keep that or not. Okay, so I come over here and I click on an X and an X shows up. And I'm like, okay, we're on the right track. Now, what happens if I click on an X here? All right, well, now all of my buttons are getting funky, right? The grid isn't really lining up. So maybe we go and we fix that. But because that this is such a tiny little bit of CSS, I'm like, I don't really want to make a whole new file for this. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to my index.html. I'm going to go up to the head section, and I'm going to throw in a sneaky little style tag there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, the button should have a minimum width of 25 pixels. Now, you know, I usually hate using height and width properties, but in this situation, because we know how big the X or O is going to be, what we are able to do is that when we click on that button, you'll notice nothing is shifting. That grid isn't moving around because I said, hey, that width needs to be 25 pixels, at least 25 pixels. If we get crazy here and add in a bunch of different text, now when I click on it, that button is going to expand. If I did a regular width, you would see that it wouldn't expand. So when I click on that, I get text hanging outside of the button. So using min width instead of just a regular width is a good way to protect yourself. But because we are only adding one letter, width is okay to use in this scenario. So I come over here and I hit X. And I'm like, okay, computer, it's your turn to go. And so I'm like, all right, where should the computer go? Well, I need some way for it to find a button and play there. It's almost like I want it to pick a random button and have it put an O there. Okay, yeah.
Would that be an if or else if statement?
So we have to say, all right, let's go back here. If I put in my console log again for my all buttons, I've got this pretty much this array here, right? And it's got all of those buttons in there. What have we done with random? Yeah. Math.random. So let's play around with that. Let's console.log math.random out. And I'm in here and I get 0.244. And I refresh and I get 0.29. And then I refresh and I get 0.76. And I'm like, all right, math.random is on the right track. That's probably what we want. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to get a random number between 0 and 8. Why? Because our array starts at index 0 and it goes all the way through to index 8. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just hypothetically use one of the most powerful tools ever created to say JavaScript, get random item from array? Well, this has almost 1,500 questions, and oh, that is using math.random and it's doing some math stuff, and math stuff scares me. But if that code works for me, then I am good to go. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to just say console log out item. Now I have to be careful here. We've gone into the depths of JavaScript. We copied someone else's code, var, old code. No, update that. So we're going to say let item, because that item may change over time. So I come over and I get items is not defined. And I'm ready to just about call it quits and be like, well, this is stupid. That's a bad Stack Overflow answer. And then I'm like, wait a second, what is items? Items is supposed to be pulling from my all buttons array. So I'm going to say all buttons. And I need to be careful because items is used another time in the length. So I'm going to say all buttons. And I come over here and I get a button. Good point. Yeah, we should say let random button. And random button.
So why does the math, well, I understand math will make it into like a whole number.
Yep.
But why does the random have current?
So it needs to know how big is the array, because if there are only 2 items in the array, I need to pick 0 or 1. But if there are 8 items in the array, I need to pick between 0 and 7.
So is we running a function there?
It is dot length is the property built into an array based off of how many items are in it. And then it's basically taking that length, multiplying it out by a random number, and then chopping off the decimal, and then using that index to get out from all buttons.
So it's going from there to this side.
Yes.
Oh,
Now, did you see Natasha's, post? I think she's going to the next one.
Yes, Natasha, we are going to do that. You are more than 1 step ahead of me, but that is the plan. Okay, so I've got my random. I'm going to say random button. Now that I've done that work, go set the inner HTML of that to my O. And I come over here and I'm like, oh boy, the computer just cheated. I should always go first as the player. And if I refresh this, my O moves around. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. But I don't want the computer to move first. I want to go first as the player. What would I need to do in order to make sure the computer does not go first? When do we want the computer to play? After, well, wait a second. We just did that, right? We said on click, button index inner HTML X. Yeah. All we need to do is take this code and put it in after you place the X there, then go find the random button, and then put an O inside that random button, and then log it out just so we can see what's going on. So I'm going to save. I come over here. I hit an X. What? That's weird. Let me refresh. Maybe it was just a glitch. Well, there's my O. All right. Now, if I play over here, I get another O. If I play here, if I keep going, wait, where's my other O? Well, what's happening here? If I play this X, yeah. Bingo. We didn't specify it needs to be an empty space. We said just go find a random button. I don't care what button you're looking for. Okay, so we can come down here and we can say if the random button dot inner HTML does not equal my NBSP. What's my NBSP? It's not actually empty, is it? It's got this non-breaking space character in it. So the way we can tell if a button is a playable position or not is not whether or not the button is empty or not, it's whether or not that button has a non-breaking space character in it. So we can say if the random button.inner HTML does not equal NBSP, then throw the O in there. So I save. I come over here and I play my X, and I got nothing. I come over here and I got nothing. Okay, share screen. Okay, so refresh to clear everything out. And then click on a button. And okay, click on another button. Why aren't you getting one more button? Random button. Inner HTML. Your second math, your math.random needs to be a capital M.
Oh, this one?
Yep.
Okay.
And it would have told you that if you had your console open.
Oh, I did, I turned it, I closed the browser, that's how it was, but I.
Okay. So, Jen, what's up?
Mine is still doing the same thing it was before.
Where it's taking an existing spot.
Yeah, it's like changing some of the X's to O's.
Okay, stand by, because I don't think mine's working yet either.
Okay.
So we're saying, all right, go look at the random button, look at the inner HTML. And I'm now realizing this was really poorly written logic. What did I write here? I wrote, if the random button is not equal to an empty space, then go take that space. I just told the computer to go cheat. Well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to say, if the button is equal to an empty space, then put an O in there. So I save, I come over, I hit my X, and I get an O in a different spot. And I go, all right, I'm going to put an X here, and it didn't play anything. All right, well, let me pick another one. The O shows up. Pick another one, that O shows up. I pick that, and I get no O. What's going on? No, because we are saying if it's an empty space, you can throw an O in there. What's the problem with that logic? Well, it's exactly.
The game is going to start empty.
What it's doing is it's saying, hey, if this is an empty spot, you can throw an O in there. Well, what if it's not an empty spot?
What if it randomly picks a spot where there's already an X?
Right. I need you to say, all right, if that spot you're looking at is not an empty spot, then go pick another freaking spot and see if that one is empty. But if that spot isn't empty, go pick another spot and see if that one's empty. And if that one's not empty, go pick another spot. What does that sound like? A loop. So how are we going to write that? We're going to say, we're going to use a for loop. And instead of a for of like we've done before, I like to give it a constraint, because what you can have is an infinite running loop, or also called a runaway loop, where it's going to run more times than you think, and all of a sudden there's smoke starting to come out of your computer. No, okay, it's not that bad, but you will actually freeze up Chrome or whatever browser you're using, and the computer will get unresponsive because that loop doesn't know when to end. So what we're going to do is we're going to write an old school for loop. We're going to say let button checker equal 0. And while button checker is less than 1,000, I want you to keep running this loop. Because if you've looked at 1,000 different buttons, chances are you're not finding the right button that's going to work for you, right? And we're going to say button checker plus plus. So I come down here, I put my for loop in there, and I'm going to say if, actually, we need to say, all right, go run this loop, go get the random button. And when you get that random button, if it's equal to the empty space, go throw an O in there, and then break out of the loop. Break is a new keyword that we haven't used before. Break is saying, I am finished with this loop. I don't care if this is the first time the loop has run or the 999th time this loop has run. If this statement is true, you can not only throw an O in there, you can also stop running this loop, break out of it, come down here. But if we have run through this loop 1,000 times and we still haven't found one, just stop, give up. There's something else going on there. What scenario could make this loop run 1,000 times? You fill up the board. The board is full, it has no way to know. All right, so let's see what's going on here. I'm gonna click an X and I get random button is not defined. Because my console log here, this was totally intentional. My console log here is outside of my for loop. So this curly brace is not an object. It is the second use of a curly brace, that is to make a block of code. Well, where have we seen blocks of code before? Well, we saw it in this for loop up here. Now we've got another for loop in here. What's the whole point of that curly brace? It's saying, hey, anything inside these curly braces between here and here is what I want you to run while this for loop exists. So because of that, that random button is out of the scope. In other words, we don't have access to the random button because it is inside the for loop, and we are trying to access it outside of the for loop. Now, if we made that outside the for loop, we can access it inside the for loop, but we can't access things inside the for loop outside of the for loop. So I'm going to take my console log, I'm going to throw that in here, and then because I don't really need to know what random button it's getting, I'm actually going to comment that out. So if I needed to check that, I could comment it back in, and you don't want to really leave broken code out of in your comments unless you actually label it on the line above of like, this is broken, don't do this. I quite literally did that today. I was like, this shit is broken. Beware, if you comment this back in, you're going to get an infinite loop. So I'm going to throw that back in there. I'm going to save. I come over here, I hit my X, I get an O where I expect. And I hit another X and I get an O where I expect. And I hit an X here. All right, doing pretty good here. And now notice everything's still responsive. If I put this in the for loop, look what happens here. I'm going to just, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to just throw this in. I'm going to console log out my button checker. Let's just see what happens there. I hit X and I get an O. I don't get a button checker. Why? Because the first time this loop ran, it found an empty space, it threw the O in there, and it braked out of the loop. Well, because it broke out of it, this console log didn't even run. The break was like, we're done with this, you're finished. I come over here, I click on another button. Okay, same thing, right? Ran through whatever one it picked randomly. But now if I pick another one, I get a 0. That loop ran one time and said, nope, this isn't an empty space. So it went back in, picked another space, and that one happened to be empty. So it logged out the 0, reran the loop, found a space, and is good to go. Now, if I pick another one, that time, it took 8 different spots it had to check. And after it checked 8 of them, after it checked 8, the 9th one that it hit was like, oh, finally I found an empty one. If I keep going here and fill the board, look at what my console gets. It is going through and it is checking 999 times, and it's like, I'm done. I give up. What do you want me to do? Just log out button checker. I come down here, I hit the end of the for loop. There's nothing after it, so I'm done and I'm good to go. Well, you got to be careful, right? Because when you get towards the end of the game, it has to check all the spots, and there's a higher probability that the spot that it's checking is not empty because it's further on in the game. So yes, you could lower that. Maybe 1,000 is excessive. Maybe I would go down to 100. But what you don't want is to set that threshold so low that it's going to check 5 buttons and give up. Well, halfway through the game, it had to check 8 buttons. So you want to be careful of where you set that threshold. Now, we could write a better algorithm here, right? That says, go through and check each spot. But we don't really want it to check each spot and just throw an O in there. We do want it to be a little bit random. We do want to play against it. Yes.
Can we not run like a sort of while a for loop that goes through all line and see if it doesn't then.
We could, but we're going to take that up a step further. Before we do that, though, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to play my game. So I put an X there and I'm like, all right, computer's blocking me there. I'm going to put an X here. All right. Not being.
Is there a way how to figure out which buttons are empty and then do random?
We could. We could. Yeah, let's do that. I like that idea. So let's do that. I'm going to say, all right, I need a way. I've got all of my buttons up here. And what I want to do is I want to figure out what one of those buttons are empty, then randomize, pick one of the random empty buttons and put an O in there. So because this is all working, and because we are all JavaScript novices here, I'm going to comment out everything in my onClick here. This entire inner for loop, I'm going to comment that out. And I'm going to say, pick a random button and check to see if it's empty. If not, loop 1,000 times. Just leave myself a note, right? Because that one was working. We don't want to forget about that. We don't want to delete it, but we also don't want it running at the same time. So I'm just going to leave myself a note there, comment the rest of it out. Okay, now what did we say? Button on click, throw the X in like we're supposed to. All right, and now we want to find all of the buttons that are empty. What function have we used before to work our way through an array? We could do a for each, and we could build the array, but there's a better function that's built in. We want to say const empty buttons. How do we find those empty buttons? We go to all of our buttons, and what do we want to do? We want to filter down the buttons that are in there. And that filter is going to give us access to each individual button. And what do we want to check for in that button? We want to check to see if the button's inner HTML is equal to our non-breaking space character. Now, that's a good idea in theory, but let's log out our empty buttons. So I'm going to save that. I come back over here. I click on one, and I get all buttons dot filter is not a function because
your semicolon is inside of your string.
It should be because it is a semicolon up here.
On line 9?
Mm-hmm. This semicolon right here matches this semicolon up here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I really hate this and hope this isn't the solution. Don't follow along for 1 second. Sometimes I hate JavaScript. So let's take it back to Palash's question, which was, hey, that's an HTML collection, not an array. And I said 99% of the time, an HTML collection is just like an array. Well, guess what we just found? The 1% of the time it is not like an array. Okay, so this is kind of hacky. These 3 dots are called a spread operator. A spread operator basically says take whatever is inside of this object or array and dump it out into this new one. The spread operator is newer ES6 JavaScript, so a lot of courses won't even cover it. But basically, it's in a way. Let me do example. Don't follow along with this. If I say array 1 equals 1, 2, 3, and I say array 2 equals ABC. Now, what if I want to combine that down into one array? Well, if I do console log array, array 1 and array 2, we would think that's going to combine those two arrays, right? Well, if I come over here and take a look, no, I've got two arrays that I've now put into a new array. I've got an array in an array. Foreshadowing. Okay, so how would I merge these two down? It's like I want to take all three of these numbers and spread them out in this new array. And then I want to take these numbers and spread them out down here. That's what the ... says. It says go into that array and dump them in to this spot. So now if I save that out, you can see I get my 1, 2, 3 ABC. It's basically saying take whatever's inside this array and spread it out. So take all the existing ones, put them in this new one. Okay, well, if that's the case, what did I do with this spread operator here? I basically said, go get all of the buttons and spread them out into this new array. Well, this is really confusing because we think about ... as an array method. Really, we can spread out all kinds of things like HTML collections. And then what we can do is say, take everything that is in that HTML collection and put it in a freaking array like it should have been in the first place so that we can do methods on it like .filter. Because .filter apparently does not work on HTML collections, but it does work on an array. That is very, very hacky code to basically say, take the HTML collection, spread out all of the items into an array. What did I basically do there? I converted the HTML collection into an array so I could use the array methods on it directly.
So any DOM element can be spread out?
I don't know the answer to that question. The question was, can any HTML collection or DOM element be spread out? You just want to be careful there because if we look at all buttons, now you can see that's an array. How do you know that's an array? There's no HTML collection. It's using the square brackets, all of that. If I take this out, now what we think is an array isn't really because it's in that HTML collection. So what I'm able to do is kind of cheat a little bit and say, well, take that HTML collection, spread it out into a new array. What I'm essentially doing there is not only converting that HTML collection to an array, but that is the most common way to copy an array. If you, using modern JavaScript, if you want an entire array copied, you can just make that new array and then spread out the existing array into the new array. So that is commonly known as copying an array. In this case, I'm not only copying it, I'm also kind of converting it from the HTML collection to an array. Flush.
Is there no way like
So the question is, you can stringify, can you arrayify? Now we're getting even into an even hackier answer, but this is a good question. This is the modern way of doing it, right? We see the spread operator, we see how the spread operator works, we get merging down arrays, all of that's great. We can use spread operators, by the way, on objects as well as arrays. I use the spread operator today in my code at work. What the other answer is, well, that spread operator didn't exist before 2015. So there has to be some way that we could do this, right? Well, you could take all the buttons and we still have to get all of the elements by the tag name. But what if we just hypothetically turned those into a string, and after we turn them into a string, turn them back into
Thank you.
So I don't know if
What if I Google just these two connections? And put them one by one connected?
you could do that. You could do that. This spread operator is going to be the best way, but the reason I bring up that code, that parse and the stringify, is because before, when you had to duplicate in an array, there was no .duplicate method. There was no, and the problem is sometimes you would copy item by item inside that array. Well, what if that array has arrays inside of it? Well, now you either need to use recursion, which is the concept we won't cover quite yet, or we need some other way of handling that. And so the parse and stringify for the longest time was the easiest way to copy something into something else and have the data type stay the same, because stringify was doing all the lifting of doing that double conversion, and that's how you would get a copy of something. So this is a very hacky way. This won't work particularly with this code because JSON can't parse HTML items or DOM items. But that is a common way to see copying. We're going to leave it at this all buttons, although Palash's idea of, well, can we loop over the HTML collection and put it in a new array, just push every item in, that would also work. But I'm going to leave it at this because this is the easiest way and the most modern way of copying that array in. Okay, after we do all of that, now we come down to our filter. And our filter is suddenly working because it's an actual array, not an HTML collection array. So I come over here. I'm going to refresh, clear everything out. I click on a button. Notice what I've got down here, 8. And if I click on another button, I get 7. So our filter code is working. It is saying, go get the empty buttons. How do we get the empty buttons? Go get all the buttons and go loop through them to filter them. While we're looping through each one, we're going to get access to each individual button. When you're looking at that button, check to see if the inner HTML of it is equal to a non-breaking space. If it is, it's an empty button. Button.innerHTML equals NPSP. That is true. So because of that, it's going to show up in our empty buttons. But if it finds something that is not equal to that ampersand NBSP semicolon, it is going to be false. And because this whole thing is false, it will not show up in our empty buttons. Okay, well, now we can do some of the work we already had. We can say, hey, go find a random button, but this time, instead of doing it on all buttons, do it on my empty buttons. Oops. Okay, and then once you've found the random button, go get the inner HTML and make that be an O. So I come over, I play my X, and I get an O. And I play the whole game. And I click on the last spot, and I get an error. Cannot set properties undefined setting inner HTML. Well, hopefully that's pretty obvious. Why isn't that working? There's no spot for it to play. So all we need to do here is say, if you didn't find a random button, if there is not, which is what that exclamation point says, a random button, then let's alert the user board is filled. Else, you did find a random button, so go put the O in there. Taylor, what's up?
So typically when
the question Taylor has is, normally when we would be doing this, we would check to see if there are 3 in a row or 3 across, or we're going to handle that in 1 second. Sukota, what's up?
Can I share my screen? I'm getting an error message.
Yep, go for it. Can I see the error message? All buttons dot filter is not a function. Okay, that is the hacky thing that I had to do in my first line of code. So if you look at my very first line where I pull in all buttons, I put in compare my line 1 to your line 1. I basically had to copy that into an array using the spread operator, which is the 3 dots.
Thank you.
Yep.
My turn now.
Jen, and then you're up.
Where is it?
Jen's in the chats. What's up, Jen?
No, I was just asking when we get those cool t-shirts you got.
Oh, you noticed supporting wearing the Hack Upstate Careers and Code swag. We are organizing a happy hour for all alumni and current students. As soon as we have that date scheduled, this will be the door prize for attending, is getting a shirt. Goggin, what's up?
Advertising.
They are also the softest shirts ever. They're just so anyway.
So why is this? It works, but I don't know why.
Do you have that last line that I put in? Yeah, so you're only getting that error if it can't find an empty button. And so that's the last bit of code that I put in. I said, if there isn't a random button, say the board is full. Otherwise, go play where you found the random button.
It has 2 buttons then?
Oh, use the letter O instead of, oh no, that shouldn't cause the problem. Put an inner HTML. You have a capital B in line 1, and it should be a lowercase b.
Oh, it is?
Nope. In your string, you get elements by tag name, and it should be a button with a lowercase b. Okay, inner HTML empty button. Let me request remote. And oh, that's not what I meant to shrink down. This is what I meant to pull over. And this is going to drive me crazy. So I need to do a quick format. Selection. Where is, I'm so used to having it format on save. Do you have your pretty,
Word wrap?
no, format on save? Do you intentionally have that off? Yeah, I know where it is for the, to do it automatically. I was just hoping.
It should have done it.
Format on save. Yeah, you do have that on. That's weird. Default formatter. Prettier, yeah, you do have it set. That's weird because this certainly is not indented properly. There we go. It just needed to save. Okay. Okay, cannot set properties on 14. Empty button, filter the button, look at the inner HTML. Empty buttons dot length. There you go.
What was he said, last one?
I put in a if statement here that says if there's not a random button, alert that the board is filled. Otherwise, take that spot. We could. So the question is, can you put a delay in before the computer takes its turn? We can do that with a set timeout. And set timeout takes 2 pieces of information or 2 parameters. One is what should run after the delay takes place. And then the second is how long is the delay? So I'm gonna set mine down to 500. That delay time is in milliseconds. So 1,000 equals 1 second, 2,000 equals two seconds, 60,000 equals 1 minute. So it's very common to see something like 60 times 1,000 here, because that would be the equivalent of 1 minute. So you can do the math in line. I'll set mine to like 2,000 just so you can see when I click, it takes a second and then plays for me. And that's one way that you can kind of slow down the computer and have it go like that. I'm going to leave that in on mine, but make it 500 just so it's a slight delay, but one that shows up. And we could even do something cool. Whenever we have a delay, it's good to tell the computer or tell the end user, hey, the computer is doing something, right? Something's loading. We're going to see that most frequently with an API call. We can't just show the New York Times bestsellers up. The New York Times has to tell us what all of those books are, and then we've got to generate that. So it's commonly a good idea to put a div in something like status. And then we can say down here, document get element by ID status inner HTML equals computer is thinking. And then in our set timeout, after we play it, we can document get element by ID again, go get that status and set the inner HTML back to your turn. And that is actually the status that we start with, right? The player has to go first. So maybe it's a good idea to put your turn in there. Now, what do? We say computer is thinking, and then we say wait the half a second, then play your O, then update the status back to your turn. But only update it after this 500 has passed. How did we tell the computer that? That is that block of code right there. So I save, I come over, I click, computer is thinking, your turn. Click somewhere else, computer is thinking, your turn. And if I go all the way through, board is filled. Okay. So now we get to the very last part, which is, hey, I won. I got 3 X's in a row. The computer should be able to tell me that. Okay, I got 3 X's in a row there. It's not doing that. Well, I could write a bunch of if statements for that, right? But it's kind of a pain because if I look at my buttons array down here, I can't tell any of these buttons apart. And that's kind of hard, right? I can see that there's nothing in them or what is inside those buttons, but I don't really know if this is the top left button or which one of these it is. What data structure makes the most sense for keeping track of our board? You can do an X and a Y, but what data structure would that be? You're right. You would think an object, but then we got to keep track of like B1, B2, B3, B4, and then how do we know B4 is in the second row?
Like the calculator thing?
Kind of like the calculator thing. What if we use an array inside another array? Ooh. Okay. Let's just think that through, right? We're going to just do proof of concept here, and then we're going to leave it here for the night. So I'm going to say let my board equal an array. Okay, that's not too scary yet. And inside that board, there are 3 rows. And inside those rows, there are 3 positions you can play. So hypothetically, I'm just going to play a couple spots here. And this is the board that I want to represent in my array. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, nothing's too scary there, right? I can say, all right, this is an O here, it's empty here, it's an X here. This is an O here, it's an X here, and it's an X here, and an O here. All right, let's see what that looks like. It's an array, no big deal. I can console log out that array. I can go in here and I can look. Now it's like array, array, array. Like, okay, what happens if I open that? Oh, this is what I'm expecting, right? That's all good. Now, what if I wanted to get out the contents of the third row? Well, I would just do my bracket and my 2, right? Because it's the second index, 0, 1, 2. And what do I get out? I get my X and my O. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I want to get out the second spot? And what do I get? I get my O. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. That means if I want to get my middle spot, I should be able to get 1, 1, and I got my X. Okay, and then if I'm like, well, what about an empty spot? Let's go to 2, 2, and now I got nothing. It's empty. What if we could take all of our code down here, and instead of keeping track of the entire board through the document object model, we could keep track of our board in our JavaScript, then write some kind of fancy smancy algorithm that's going to generate my buttons based off of the board. That's what we're doing tomorrow. That's it. Well, we got 15 minutes left of class, so if you want to ask questions, go for it.
My first question, you got the cross array, but how would we compare the OOX in the vertical column? But I can make it off of that.
So the question is, how do we check the OO and then hit this X and now see that that X is preventing the win, right? So there are two things that we're going to tackle tomorrow. One is, well, a couple things. One, we're going to tackle how do we use this board to generate out all of our buttons, which means that we can go back through and delete all of this repeated code up here. That's step one. Step two is making sure our on-clicks still work, because if we're generating the buttons, they still need to run our function. Step three is going to be, well, if the person wins, how do we alert the computer? And what happens when they win? We probably want it to reset. So we're going to be able to play around with that. And then the fourth thing is, can we build artificial intelligence? Can we say, oh, there are 2 X's in a row there, or that player is about to win. Let's block that. Because if we can get that block working, hypothetically, you should never win. Right? Tic-tac-toe, if you play it right, the computer never wins and the player never wins. If we can test our artificial intelligence to that point, we can now have an algorithm that intelligently blocks the user. All coming down the pipeline tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, I like that one. That's a good one for the last 13 minutes of class. If I click on the X, I get the O, and I'm like, screw you, O, and I take it. And it's like, oh, I'll play down here. And now we can really like outnumber the computer and take all of its spots and be like, no, I win. Okay, well, maybe we should fix that. So we are going to say button on click before you throw that inner HTML up there. Let's just check to see if the button inner HTML equals an O. And if it does, alert, cheater. And then break. Nope, not break. No, that, oh, return. Thank you, because I'm in a function. We can put an else here, but then we have to put all of our other code inside that else. And that whenever we put another block inside another block of code, that's adding more complexity to it, right? So in general, and there is some debate over what this or not, it is preferred to put a return in an if, because this return is going to make this button on click stop running. It's kind of like the break for a function. Whenever we hit a return, even if we're not returning anything, it's saying I'm done running this function. So this return in here is the exact same thing as putting an else here and putting all of this code inside of the else. But this is preferred because we're not adding yet another block of code. We don't have to indent everything over one more time. We're just saying if this thing is true, alert, and then return this on click. We're done. You don't need to keep running it. So I save, I come over, I play my X, the O plays, I click on the O, I get cheater, and I hit OK, and I have to now go take another turn.
Can you do that with the X button as well? Because you could push the X twice, the same X twice, and the O will play in 2 different spots.
Yeah, so instead of checking for the O, there are 2 ways we can do that. We can say or button.inner HTML equals an X. And then if we hit the X and then we hit the X again, we're going to get our cheater. Or we could get a little bit more clever in the logic here and say if the button.inner HTML does not equal an empty space, then say cheater. So now we hit the X, we get cheater, we hit the O, we get cheater, and we're good to go. So this just gives you an idea of how you can write your logic statements to be a little bit more concise. Both of them do the exact same thing, just depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Max,
Rain, and then Sequoia, and then Palash.
okay, so I have done what you have down, but my O stopped working. I double checked my code to make sure I can find the error, but can you just take a quick look, please?
Oh no, go ahead.
All right.
Sorry, is that a stretch?
But let me make sure I don't have anything crazy up because my luck. Okay.
Okay, so first thing I noticed, your console isn't open. So pop
No.
open your console.
You're absolutely correct. I did a different page. Sorry about that.
And now we see cannot set properties of null setting in our HTML script line 29. So at least we've got a starting point. So go ahead to line 29 in your code.
Okay, let me see if I can find that. All right. I think no, I need that for this one right here.
So you've got your get element by ID status. So head to your index.html and show me the div with the ID of status.
That's the absolute problem right there.
Aha. So
Yeah.
compare that to my HTML line 33, and you'll see where I added in that div.
Okay.
And I
Okay,
think that should fix your problem.
Thank you.
Sequoia, what's up?
I was just kidding. Rain solved my problem. No issue here. Thanks, Max.
Palash and then Gagan. Check your empty random button line 25 and make sure both of those say empty buttons. Both of them, the math.random has 2 empty buttons, not just 1. It should be empty buttons and empty buttons. Okay, share your screen. Oh, okay. Yeah, Brandy.
I keep getting an error.
Okay, share your screen. Is it that inner HTML cannot be defined for status text?
Yeah.
Okay, so for everyone, I snuck in a div ID status your turn in my HTML. Like the only thing I did in my HTML for the whole second half of class.
Oh.
So we can't set your turn or computer is thinking unless we give the HTML a place to hook into our JavaScript. Other questions? All right, tomorrow we delete all this code and do it all over again. Okay, maybe not all of the code, but we take all the lessons we've learned from here and learn how to do that in our JavaScript array and how much easier it is. So different way of thinking about the problem, still giving us a better data structure to work with. I will stick around in case anyone has questions that pop up. Go ahead and share your screen. Otherwise, you guys can get out of here. Have an awesome evening. Hopefully, we'll see you in person tomorrow in this room. Do not go to the other room. And I also have the paper handout from the guest speaker. I will scan that in and share that with you guys remotely as well. All right, take me to your console in the browser. X is not defined, script line 2. You are missing quotes.
Line 2.
All those X's have to be in quotes because they're strings. Otherwise, it thinks it's a variable that it's trying to evaluate.
All of things.
Well, you're using 0 for your O, which is why it's not giving you an error because it's just a number.
Oh, okay.
So you're good.
All right.
Last call for question.
Good night.